Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Test, test. Check, check. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March meeting of the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. Welcome to all those in person and online. I'll ask the committee coordinator to call the roll, please.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Luloff, Councillor Skalski,
Here.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Present.
And Chair Brown.
I'm here.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Chris. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and or zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 4.1, 6.1, 7.1, and 7.2 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those specifically identified in the Planning Act who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on the 11th of March 2026, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, confirmation of our minutes from our meeting of Thursday, February 5th. Are the minutes of the ARAC meeting of Thursday, February 5th confirmed? Thank you. Item 4.1, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 635 and 891 Jenkinson Road. There is a presentation and do have delegations. We've also received several pieces of correspondence. I'll ask city staff to come up. I believe there's a presentation. No? Thank you very much. And before we get into the presentation, General Manager Wallace, I believe you asked for a moment.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to apologize to the committee, the residents who have a strong interest in this file, and the applicants for the procedural delays and confusion that has happened over the last few meetings. Service excellence is something we pride ourselves at the city of being a core value, and this has not been a great example of that. But I want to assure you that we've made some process changes, and we will work very hard to avoid this in the future.
No, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate the opportunity to address that publicly. All right, the team will go through the presentation, and then we'll go into public delegations. So thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair and committee. So my name is Cass Glazero. I'm the file lead for this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. I'm a little under the weather today, so I apologize if I cough or anything. So I'm going to give a short presentation here to outline the existing zoning and official plan designations and overlays that are applicable to the site. And I'm also going to outline the proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw. And given the somewhat complex history of official plan amendments and the associated technical errors related to those amendments, I'm also going to give a brief summary of the previous amendments that are relevant to or that have had an impact on the current proposal. Next slide, please. So as the slide says, this is a location map. It's a 2025 aerial photo from Geo Ottawa showing the location of 635 and 890 Jenkinson Road. And I apologize for the color. You can see that the two parcels are outlined in yellow, sort of at the bottom half of the site. It's the parcel that looks like a quarry. So 635 is the parcel on the right. It's sort of a boot-shaped parcel. And 890 is the parcel on the left, and it's sort of a upside-down L. They're both owned by R.W. Tomlinson Limited and are part of Tomlinson's current and future Stittsville quarry. So for the purposes of the presentation, I'm going to, and for the purposes of reviewing the application, I consider the two parcels as one contiguous parcel of land, and I'll just refer to it throughout the presentation as the site. So the site is located just west of Stittsville, and you can see Stittsville is visible in the upper right-hand corner of the map image. The western limit of the urban boundary corresponds with the western limit of Stittsville. Highway 7 runs parallel to the northern limits of the site. And at the very top of the map image, you can see a small portion of the Highway 7 and Highway 417 interchange. And there's a line that you can faintly see running diagonally sort of through right along the bottom of the site, kind of up toward the east. And that is the Ottawa Carleton Trailway portion of the Trans-Canada Trail. As you can see from the image, mineral extraction operations at the quarry are well established on the western half of 890 Jenkinson Road and continue further west to 900 and 1156 Jenkinson Road. Next slide, please. So to facilitate expansion of the Stittsville Quarry, R.W. Tomlinson is proposing an OPA and ZBA for the portions of 635 and 891 Jenkinson Road that will be licensed for mineral resource extraction under the Aggregate Resources Act, or the ARA. And my apologies, so I'm just going to refer to the official plan amendment as OPA, zoning bylaw amendment as ZBA for the folks listening. So the size of the area proposed for the ARA license is 117 hectares in total. The extraction area occupies 106 hectares, and a buffer area will occupy 11 hectares of land, and that's going to go around the perimeter of the extraction area and the limits of the ARA license area. The buffer will surround the portions of the future extraction area that are not adjacent to existing quarry operations, and it will be adjacent to the wetland on the eastern portion of the property. In order to obtain the ARA license, among other things, the lands must be rezoned for mineral extraction. Various schedules to the official plan also require amendments to facilitate the license. Schedule B9 to the OP will be amended to add the bedrock resource overlay to the site, and schedules C11A and C11B will be amended to remove the natural heritage features overlay from portions of the site. And next slide, please. So this is a site detail map, and again, I've taken it from Geo Ottawa. It shows the portions of the site that are subject to the OPA and ZBA applications, and also shows the current zone boundaries, the overlays and designations in the various OP schedules. So the area that is outlined in orange, sort of yellow on the screen, shows the portion of the site that is actually subject to the ARA license. The red lines delineate the various zones that are on the site. The darker green areas represent, I guess on the screen, I'm sorry, it's a lighter, almost light blue area, represent the natural heritage features overlay, and the blue area represents wetlands. The wetland area on the south of the site within the site boundary is not a provincially significant wetland. So the Geo Ottawa layer does show it as a provincially significant wetland, or PSW, which I'll explain a bit later in the presentation. But just because of the layer on Geo Ottawa, I've noted that the blue areas are provincially significant and non-significant wetlands. The wetland areas to the east of the site, south of the site, and then the little portion north of Highway 7 are part of the provincially significant Goulburn wetland complex. And the black hatched area represents the bedrock resource overlay. Next slide, please. This image is an excerpt of Schedule B9 to the OP and shows the site outlined in red. The amendment to Schedule B9 will add the bedrock resource overlay to the site corresponding with the area in red. And so that black hatched area that you see on the map is the existing bedrock resource overlay. And so the applicant is proposing to amend B9 to add the overlay to that area outlined in red. Next slide, please. So this map is an excerpt of schedules C11A and C11B to the official plan. The schedules themselves are two separate maps showing Natural Heritage System West and the Natural Heritage System South. But in this case, the site appears on both of those maps, and therefore both schedules require the amendment. The Natural Heritage Features overlay on this site is shown in green and is proposed for removal from within and just outside of the site area. You can see it there, sort of where the triangle of the site is. And then there's a very, very small portion on the east side of the site, which is not visible on the map from this size. The significant designation, the significant wetland designation should not be showing in the map where it appears on the site because of a previous official plan amendment, but also a technical error. And I'll explain that in the last slide. Next slide, please. And the zoning is shown here on the map. So there's multiple zones on the site. There's ME, RU, which is rural countryside, and pardon me, ME is mineral extraction. There's a very small portion of environmental protection zone at the top of the site. It kind of crosses over Highway 7. And then there's a mineral extraction zone subject to the holding or rural exception number 1, pardon me, and subject to a holding provision. The holding symbol applies only to the permitted mineral extraction use. The holding symbol may only be removed by amendment to the bylaw upon compliance with a completed application made to the province for a license to extract mineral aggregates and an approved environmental impact statement approved by the city submitted when the proposed mineral extraction operation is adjacent to lands zoned EP3 or environmental protection zone, or lands that are designated rural natural feature in the official plan. And so the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is, or shall rezone all of the lands within the ARA license area to just an ME zone. So we're lifting the hold and rezoning rural countryside in EP3 to ME. On the last slide, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a summary of all the previous OPAs that the site was subject to, as well as the proposed OPAs. And once again, I apologize, the colors are not great here. So the area outlined in or delineated by the black line is the proposed official plan amendment to Schedule B9 to add the bedrock resource overlay to the site. The areas outlined in green, which corresponds with the big globular shape in the triangle area. And then on the east of the site, there's a little kind of a sliver adjacent to the irregular site boundary. Those are 2 natural feature areas, and the proposed OPA related to those areas is to amend Schedule C11A and C11B to remove the natural heritage features overlay. So the next 2 map areas are related to past official plan amendments, and they explain a bit of the what I've touched on earlier in the presentation related to significant wetlands designation still being on the site. So the area that is in blue corresponds with a wetland area on site, which has previously had provincially significant status, but that status has been removed. And through an OPA, OPA 5, should have been removed from schedules C11A and C11B. So as I note there on the site, and pardon me, also the green space designation also on Schedule B9 was also supposed to be removed through OPA 5. OPA 5 was approved. Unfortunately, the green space and the natural heritage features it's a very complicated history. So the green space and the significant wetlands were not removed from B9, C11 or C11A or C11B. OPA 46 was an omnibus OPA proposing technical amendments to correct the errors from OPA 5. So some background on OPA 5. OPA 5 was a technical amendment to the new official plan to implement an Ontario Land Tribunal decision related to a previous official plan amendment, which amended the old official plan. So OPA, and that was OPA 240. So OPA 240 was approved by City Council in February 2020 and initially imposed the significant wetlands overlay over various portions of the area around the Goulburn wetland complex, including the southern wetland on the subject property. The decision was appealed by the owner and others. However, prior to the OLT hearing in late 2021, Nick Stowe from the City of Ottawa, and Mr. Stowe is a licensed wetland evaluator, submitted a letter to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry recommending that the western and southern wetlands be removed from the provincially significant Goulburn wetland complex. The recommendation was based on the findings of Mr. Stowe and Fergus Nicol, who is also a certified wetland evaluator. The MNRF accepted the recommendation, as did the Ontario Land Tribunal, with respect to the lands that were subject to the appeal. So the OLT decision resulted in amendments to OPA, or Official Plan Amendment 240, which excluded the southern wetlands from the lands being included under the significant wetland designation. Because the OLT decision was rendered after the new OP was adopted, OPA 5 followed in September 2023 to implement the OLT decision. So I'm sure you can all follow everything that I just said, and I can quiz you on it later. So, because, pardon me, so OPA, and I guess we'll get on to the next one. So that now that that's all been clearly explained. So the next area on the map there is a very pale yellow shaded area, and that is, that's related to OPA 28. And that shaded area corresponds with those two areas that are outlined in green that are proposed to be removed from the natural heritage features overlay. So OPA 28 was approved by council on September 28th, 2024, and would have removed, and actually, pardon me, removed the significant wetland designation from that western wetland area. So that's the large kind of globular area. And that was per the 2021 recommendation of Mr. Stowe, and also removed the significant wetland designation from the smaller piece that's outlined in green adjacent to the license area. OPA 28 also added the natural heritage features overlay to the western wetland area and removed it from the eastern wetland. Technical errors following both OPA 5 and OPA 28 resulted in schedules B9, C11A, and C11B not actually being updated to reflect all of the associated approvals. So to be clear, council approved the removal of the significant wetland designation from all three of the wetland areas on this site, but the maps were never updated to reflect that approval. OPA 46 was approved by council on June 25th, 2025, and contained recommendations for technical amendments to correct the errors from OPAs number 5 and 28. Portions of the OPA are still under appeal. However, none of the appeals are related to the technical amendments affecting the subject property. So that concludes the presentation. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much. We do have 5 delegations, so I'm going to invite Mike Wesley, no stranger to the committee, to come head down. You've got 5 minutes, Mike. Good morning. No, you just have to hit the button at the bottom there, Mike. There you go. Now you're live.
All right. Mike Wesley, 7176 Llewellyn Road, Stittsville. Been there 56 years. My issue here is drainage. I want to know if the pumping is going to be putting water into Flowing Creek again as previous waters were put. And if Flowing Creek is selected, then I have a problem. We have enough drainage issues not corrected for years. We don't need more. 2005, the City of Ottawa designates 60 property owners, PSW, in our area. You don't flood private properties, then designate them PSW. And that's what looks like is happening here all the time. I showed Mr. Crothiker, the owner of the 100 acres across from me, the 7 by 50 foot culvert under Fernbank Road. He saw firsthand the amount of water being dumped onto his property without permission from the north. He then called in an excavator. In 2023, 2024, that culvert got enlarged to 12 feet in diameter, or 12 feet wide. Anyways, June 5th, 2005, a huge diversion ditch was excavated over top of a little hand dug overflow ditch on the Crothiker property. He wanted to get rid of the water that's being dumped onto him. Conley, a Llewellyn area, now gets 10 times more water than normal because of the diversion, as per Robinson Consultants Report, 2006. Culvert under Llewellyn Road at Conley was enlarged, overwhelming downstream culverts causing flooding and water to back up onto our properties. mine included. If the original drainage area of Upper Flowing Creek were restored and the diversion blocked up, the base flow in the Conley roadside ditch should be reduced significantly or cease altogether. This is in the Robinson Consultant Report that the City of Ottawa hires. Terry Hale and I tried to have Flowing Creek made into a municipal drain system, but failed due to runaway costs. Lauren Franklin told Terry and I a $250,000 engineer, it would cost us $250,000 to get between Fluellen and Fernbank cleaned out. And the engineer report came in at 3.5 million. The petitioners that I had signed up in the area, they just couldn't handle the costs. And why should they have to pay to get rid of other people's water? Plus, they gave no permission for all this water to be dumped onto their properties. So that's where I have an issue with the Tomlinson Group. I just need to know where the water is going to go. If it's going to go down our way, these drains have got to be corrected and corrected now. I've had the city out many, many times showing them the flooding issues. They've agreed with me. The culvert under Fluellen Road, dumping water onto the smaller culverts downstream, they can't handle it. So the water backs up, floods my neighbor's properties, then floods mine. Well, I spent thousands of dollars berming my property up and long hours of labor doing all this. The city's done nothing but make things worse with larger culverts up against smaller culverts and flooding private properties. This stuff's got to change. That's all I've got to say.
All right, thanks, Mike. We can't pose questions to the applicant now, but we can certainly hold those questions and I can ask them when the time's appropriate. So that's after the public delegations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've kept you up to speed.
You have.
Yourself on all this.
And you've done a great job.
And nothing's been done.
I appreciate you coming out, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Ken McCrae. Is Ken here today? Oh, there he is. Welcome, Ken.
Good morning.
Morning. You've got 5 minutes. Thanks for coming today.
I brought a little something here for you to see. That's a Midland painted turtle. That's the remains of it after Tomlinson drained their small wetland on the property next to the Lafarge property line. I sent an email to all members of council on September 17th, 2024, opposing the reevaluation of the Western Wetland and Tomlinson's proposed Stittsville Quarry on Jenkinson Road. The reevaluation of the Western Wetland and the Natural Environment Report and Environmental Impact Study carried out by WSP Canada Inc. and the revised report done by Cambrian are both seriously flawed. They both failed to report the presence of this small wetland on the westerly side of Tomlinson's property, adjacent to the Lafarge property. How did they miss this wetland when they had a breeding bird station at or very close to it? And in their breeding bird surveys, it states, these surveys were completed using a combination of point count surveys and walking transects. Each survey location consisted of a 50-meter radius circular plot with an additional 50-meter radius buffer, i.e. a total of 100-meter radius. A list of all species was compiled and the locations of any species at risk were marked using a handheld GPS. That's a quote from their study. So how did they miss seeing this wetland and its threatened species at risk Blanding's turtle and Midland painted turtles? incompetence, or corruption. They also missed many other species, including at least 3 species of minnow, Johnny Darter, brook stickleback, and central mud minnow, at least 17 species of birds, at least 16 insect species, at least 2 mammals, porcupine and beaver, and at least 33 plant species. The WPS study and Cambrian study say no blanding turtles or evidence of nesting was identified on the site or in the study area during targeted surveys following MNRF protocols. No blanding turtles or evidence of nesting by any species of turtle have been seen on the site by WSP, formerly Golder's, staff in the 10+ years that biological monitoring has been occurring in the wetlands and terrestrial habitats on the site. So they're saying they covered all of the site, which is obviously a lie, or they would have seen the blandings and midland painted turtles wetland. Also, I found 2 baby midland painted turtles in the wetland after Tomlinson drained it as proof that nesting around that wetland does, or at least did, occur. The natural environment report and environmental impact study should be redone by an independent consultant selected by the city
1 minute.
with input from the MNR and MECP, with Tomlinson paying for the consultant. Perhaps have our VCA staff do it. That wetland could be restored by filling in that Tomlinson narrow drainage ditch and having several water tankers drive in on the nearby road, approximately 200 meters from the wetland, and use hoses to pump their water into that wetland. Moving on to the staff report, on page 19 at the beginning, under the provincial policy statement sections, it states staff have reviewed this proposal and have determined that it is consistent with the provincial policy statement. I disagree with that statement in that section 4.1 of the provincial policy statement states development and site alteration shall not be permitted in fish habitat or in the habitat of endangered and threatened species, except in accordance with provincial and federal requirements. Tomlinson has not complied with PPS requirements.
Ken, I'll just get you to wrap up.
They intentionally destroyed the habitat of at least 3 minnow species and killed them. They also destroyed the habitat of threatened species at risk, blandings turtles, and may have killed some. Tomlinson doesn't have authorization from the Minister of DFO allowing Tomlinson to legally destroy the fish habitat that this wetland provided and to kill the fish that were in it.
Ken?
Yeah.
I'm gonna call time there.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming out. Colleagues, are there any questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you.
Our next delegate is Sarah Hasenack from Ontario Nature. I believe Sarah is online. You can just promote Sarah, please. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
All right, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And yeah, good morning again, Chair Brown and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is, of course, Sarah Hasenack, and I'm the Conservation Campaigns Coordinator for Ontario Nature. And as you'll know from our past presentations, Ontario Nature is a registered charity that protects wild species and wild spaces through conservation, education, and public engagement. We represent over 150 member groups across the province, including the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands, who, of course, you'll also be hearing from today. In short, I'm here to recommend that you reject the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments facilitating the proposed expansion of the Tomlinson-Stittsville Quarry. And instead, I'm asking you to prioritize protecting the incredibly valuable wetlands present at the site. As you know, 2 of these wetlands were previously considered part of the provincially significant Goulburn Wetland Complex. Of course, they lost this provincially significant status and the strict protection it provides following a decision at the Ontario Land Tribunal and reevaluation of certain areas under the weakened Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. Despite changes to their formal designation, though, these wetlands are incredibly important to protect. The wetlands and other natural areas at this site support over 350 plant and animal species, including several species at risk and their habitats, making a clear case for protecting them from a biodiversity perspective. But in addition to the biodiversity value, these wetlands provide significant benefits to the surrounding communities. One wetland on the property received the highest possible score for its ability to mitigate floods when it was reevaluated, indicating that it has an important role in preventing those floods in nearby communities and properties. This is an increasingly critical service as climate change drives worsening flood risks in Ottawa and across Southern Ontario. The need to take action to prevent and prepare for floods is also emphasized throughout the city's climate resilience strategy and reflected in comments from the 2024 Rural Summit shared at the February 5th meeting of this committee and by Mr. Wesley just moments ago. Protecting these wetlands for their flood mitigation value would align with those commitments to climate resilience and to addressing rural residents' concerns. This same wetland also received the maximum score for its contributions to groundwater recharge, another critical service given how many of Ottawa's rural residents rely on groundwater. And the importance of this service for the community is also reflected in several comments summarized in the staff's report expressing concerns about how this proposal may affect groundwater. The staff report acknowledges that if approved, the expansion of this quarry would result in the loss of all natural features on the site. Of course, all the benefits that these wetlands currently provide for people and for nature would also be lost, and they would be very expensive to replace. Multiple studies from other parts of Ontario have established that protecting existing wetlands is far less expensive than replacing just their stormwater services alone with built solutions. This is especially true when the ongoing maintenance and operational costs of built solutions is taken into consideration. I also want to challenge the narrative that this project will only have short-term implications on the natural features and that a no net loss approach premised on the eventual rehabilitation of the quarry at the end of its life provides meaningful compensation for the losses incurred. There doesn't appear to be any set timeline for when operation of the quarry expansion might be complete, meaning that final rehabilitation efforts meant to compensate for the losses of these natural areas would be occurring at some unknown future date, resulting in an undeniable net loss in the meantime. The final rehabilitation can also be expected to create a different type of ecosystem than what is currently there due to the lasting impacts of aggregate extraction and challenges of rehabilitating exact ecosystems.
1 minute.
So even when final rehabilitation does occur, it will be more like losing an apple and then possibly waiting decades before being given an orange to replace it. The orange isn't inherently bad, but it certainly isn't the same thing, and it certainly doesn't make up for the years waited without either. This is why I'm asking you to reject the proposed amendments enabling the quarry expansion. Given the existing wetlands' significant contributions to issues of public interest, including safety from floods and environmental well-being, the provincial planning statement does empower the city to prioritize other land uses over aggregate operations. So it's my hope that you'll take this opportunity to make protecting these wetlands for the long-term benefit of people, plants, and animals that depend on them your utmost priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Always appreciate you taking the time to delegate at committee. I'm not seeing any questions from my colleagues, but thank you again for coming out and delegating today. Our next delegate is Janet Stavinga, former mayor of Goulburn Township and city councillor. Janet, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here today in another capacity. I'm the president and co-founder of the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands, and I'm joined today by our Vice President, Bruce Dudley. We are a volunteer-driven, community-based, not-for-profit a corporation dedicated to the protection, the restoration, the regeneration, and rewilding of the ecologically significant and the fragile Goulburn Wetland Complex. Our supporters are from Stittsville, Western Ottawa, and across this province. We had hoped today to share a different message with you, one that showcased successful collaboration with the private sector. But unfortunately, we cannot. Consequently, we echo the comments from our partner, Ontario Nature, and we request that you reject the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendments that allow for the expansion of Stittsville 2 Quarry for all the reasons outlined moments ago. Wetlands are increasingly being recognized as ecological powerhouses, and none too soon. These vibrant and diverse ecosystems are havens of biodiversity, including many species at risk. They help reduce climate change by storing large amounts of carbon, and they support healthy communities by providing a range of natural infrastructure known as ecosystem services. Yet the findings of the proponent's documentation and accepted by staff are that through mitigation measures and a rehabilitation plan, there are no negative impacts are anticipated on the areas of significant woodlands, non-provincially significant wetlands, and the adjacent provincially significant wetlands. Yet these narratives are false. When making a decision today, you'll be engaging a significant trade-off, and you should not be deluded. You'll be sacrificing innumerable ecosystem services provided by wetlands and significant woodlands for generations to come. If you could switch to the next slide, please. The significant wetlands, a band around the western wetland, which was formerly designated as a PSW, was once covered this property. This tract of significant woodlands was removed in the winter of 2012, well before 2013, and the approval of the site plan control application for the asphalt plant and the registration of that agreement on title in February 2014. Yet this remnant portion of significant woodlands is an intact, mature, mixed conifer forest of cedar, spruce, and pine. Some cedars in the wetland buffer are likely 100 years old. These significant woodlands continue to serve as an excellent wildlife corridor in the summer and winter and a travel corridor. The ecological loss of these significant woodlands, along with what was once present, is irreplaceable. The destruction of the western and the southern wetlands and the resultant release of stored carbon, along with the removal of the opportunities for future carbon sequestration, also contradict the city's recently adopted climate-ready Ottawa strategy and the priority areas, including building resilient communities and natural environment. Also, do not take comfort in the 30-meter buffer around the eastern portion of the Goulburn wetland complex. Science is telling us that wetland buffers should be increased to ensure they meet fundamental ecological requirements. We're looking at 120 to 150 meters, not 30 meters. Just over a month ago, in honor of the World Wetlands Day, the Nature Conservancy of Canada announced that it had safeguarded 91 hectares of its Marlborough Forest wetland in the southern reaches of Ottawa through the Federal Ecological Gifts Program. We understand the city was involved in this exciting initiative. Yet today, the committee is considering a report that will destroy wetlands and the vibrant and diverse ecosystems which are havens of biodiversity. Further, although the proponent's report identified significant wildlife habitats on site, they did not assess the broader landscape travel impacts, the broader level impacts of disrupting wildlife corridors that connect these habitats to the wider wetland complex. Documentation from the proponent notes blinding turtles habitat, yet none were cited. However, we know blinding turtles are present. These findings were communicated to the proponent. We recommended further targeted studies for species known to be present in the broader wetland complex, but not identified in the initial assessment, including blinding turtles, eastern meadowlark, and bobolink. We also recommend that additional information be required as to the proposed mitigation strategies. Regrettably, these observations and our recommendations were dismissed. Again, science is leading the way. Environmental DNA, or eDNA, has become an important tool for tracking the potential occurrence of rare or endangered species that may be elusive or scarce that regular sampling or monitoring will not pick up. It's particularly valuable in areas with fragmented wetlands. The project area also encompasses an alvar ecosystem. Again, this is not noted in the supporting documentation. Do not be persuaded that the final rehabilitation of the mineral aggregate operation will negate any negative impact. Again, science is telling us that current restoration practice fails to recover original levels of wetland restoration functions even after many decades. Should you choose to support this application, we ask for your support in making the following requests for Thomason to build community confidence. 1 is to re-engage the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands. 2, to establish a community-based working group. 3, to explore involvement in a local approach for assessing carbon storage. Time precludes us from speaking to these requests in detail, but we have provided Councillor Brown with a more fulsome understanding of our requests and well in advance. We look forward to responding to any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for being here today, Janet. Obviously, this is something you're very passionate about and dedicated to, which I admire. Your last comment about, should the committee support this, and I believe that the application does have support here today. But so let's chat about that last comment in terms of continued engagement with the community, with Friends of the Stittsville Wetlands. How do you see that moving forward? What would you like to see in terms of an ongoing relationship or dialogue, and what would be the goal?
Okay. The goal is to raise community confidence. Regrettably, the lines of communication went dead well over a year ago, despite repeated requests to have a conversation. Interesting enough that, yes, acknowledged that we were on very different sides. But what is interesting, and I will reference in the submission of letters originally, there was a letter that basically said, do not support this whatsoever, and that was provided by a partner, Ontario Nature, in conjunction with an environmental defense. We were asked to join on, sign that letter. We chose not to, and we advised that of Tomlinson because we wanted to speak to them about it. We raised concerns though, but regrettably, when we raised those concerns, there was offense taken. And consequently, the lines of communication just stopped, regrettably. So what we're asking then is to build that community confidence again. And what we're asking is for Tomlinson to re-engage the Friends of Stittsville, to provide us as an organization an opportunity to better understand the revised versions of their operational plans that were submitted to the city in late December, the rehabilitation plan, the cross-section plan, to create better understanding of the restrictive covenant on the easterly wetland that was referenced in reports. The off-site compensation with the National Capital Commission that we know has been cited. This has been, we've learned this through the conversations we've had with Algonquins Ontario. We'd like to actually be apprised of these things. We're also requesting that they explore with the Friends of Stittsville the opportunity to partner with us and the conservation authorities to effectively monitor and manage invasive Phragmites within the Rideau Valley, Mississippi watersheds. We understand that they're doing that, intending to do that with the National Capital Commission, but here's an opportunity to do it within this particular watershed. We also want to further communicate that maybe there might be an opportunity for other wetland habitat improvements beyond the project area. So actually looking within the Goulburn Wetland Complex. So that's the first one, that establishing, opening those lines of communication. The second one is actually to formalize those lines of communication by establishing a community-based working group. There are people beyond the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands that are concerned with in the community, concerns even raised by Mike Wesley today, and I'm very familiar with Mike because I've dealt with him, I've spoken with him often when a mayor and as an Ottawa City Councillor, but there are concerns within the rural community as well. So the opportunity to establish a community-based working group, it could be also including the representation by the Algonquins, and interesting enough, they did cite that in their correspondence, which I understand was copied to this committee. I don't know whether you actually received a copy of it though. They would also include, of course, community, environmental, and regulatory representatives, including the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands, the Conservation Authority, and we could actually work with Tomlinson to actually provide to look at the responses with regards to the environmental performance and the monitoring. There's a lot of monitoring underway, but it's an opportunity to bring transparency, public transparency to that monitoring process. It's not whether it be the surface water monitoring, the groundwater monitoring. Also further clarity about the progressive and the final rehabilitation to be taking part in that when that comes forward. There's also, of course, the mitigation measures that are being referenced and making sure that we, again, understand about them and see that they're being undertaken. So the third element that we're asking for is quite innovative and quite creative. And this is something that's recently, well, it began with our conversations with Carleton University as part of our mission statement and our goals. Our goals are to develop collaborative relationships with the private sector, with the public sector, with universities and colleges. And we've been developing a fabulous relationship with the University of Carleton through their geography department with regards to how they can use remote sensing to measure the health of wetlands. There is an opportunity for Currently, right now, the City of Ottawa has a proposal that's working its way through the approval process involving Carleton University to develop a local approach for determining carbon storage and carbon sequestration. My understanding through our contact through Carleton University, as well as our city contact, is they're looking at publicly owned wetlands to do that. Here's an opportunity, should you approve this, where we're going to see the loss of some very wetlands that were significant, no longer, but still that value is. It's just the bar has changed by the provincial policy changes. But to actually do some testing so we can determine what is the carbon sequestration potential, what is the carbon storage within those particular wetlands that will be stored. That will be one of many sites that are looked at across the province. So again, it's an opportunity. If we're going to lose the wetlands, can we not use that information to contribute to a better knowledge of the science so we can protect our wetlands?
Thank you for that very thorough answer. I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Janet, if you could talk a little bit about the advocacy work that you do not only with City Council, but with the province of Ontario, I think that would be valuable as well, because ultimately we're here today because of changes the province makes. And so could you fill committee in on some of the work that you've done with the province and advocating for wetlands here in the west end of the city?
So certainly we are communicating regularly to the province, indicating that their policies are having a detrimental impact. You'll hear more about that in the item on the omnibus. We'll be speaking a little bit more about that, Sarah and I. But what's also, greatly disconcerting too, and we have signed a joint letter with the Ontario Nature with regards to the proposed amalgamation, the proposed merger of the conservation authorities. As you know, conservation authorities through their act have regulatory authority through not just provincially significant wetlands, but even wetlands that were previously provincially significant, or just in some cases, all wetlands. It depends upon the conservation authority. So I'm not sure whether you're referencing that work. But in addition to that letter that we sent through the Friends of Stitts the Wetlands with Ontario Nature, as well as 93 organizations across Ontario, I put on another hat, and that hat is as a former source protection chair for the Mississippi Rideau watershed. I was appointed by the Minister of the Environment, the first of 19. This was of the initial efforts after the Clean Water Act. Many of you might recall that in the year 2000, May, when Walkerton crisis happened, 7 people died and 2,000 people became very ill. There's a subsequent inquiry from Justin O'Connor that recommended the development of source protection areas to protect water at source. I had the privilege to be appointed along with 19 in this inaugural undertaking, which was groundbreaking, not just for Ontario, but groundbreaking globally. We had inquiries even as far as China about the work that we were doing. Also, my hat that I wore was the former vice chair of the Rideau Valley, and of course, as the mayor and a city councillor too, greatly concerned about this and how this merger of conservation authorities, and we can speak later about that. We've shared our correspondence. It was correspondence that's actually been signed by over 74 individuals with decades and decades of watershed experience from professionals, including former ministers who actually served with the Conservative government. So as recently as yesterday, even though again, I'm used to silence, but in terms of telephone lines, but I think Councillor Brown, you know me to being very tenacious. And last night, I received a email correspondence that our correspondence to the Premier had been forwarded to the Minister of Municipal Environment, Conservation and Protection, and we are looking at scheduling a meeting with our delegation, not of 74 of us, but of a smaller group, subset, to advocate on behalf of municipalities, on behalf of our conservation authorities, on behalf of millions, the vast majority of Ontarians who are covered by 36 conservation authorities. So as I say, there's a lot of changes that are happening at the province, which impact municipalities directly, that remove tools within your toolbox. I can't even imagine sitting in your shoes and your seats at this time. I'd be deeply frustrated by the fact that many of those things those tools that I had accessible to me, that we had as a council, have been taken away from you. So I appreciate today that you have a challenge before you in terms of making your decision. We acknowledge that, but we're asking you that in making that decision, should you support it, to please request. It is, if I could say, and I have spoken to Mr. Pierce earlier, not just today, but also in February about our requests, not as in great detail as I did today with Councillor Kelly, but this is an opportunity for us to open lines of communication, to build trust and confidence in our community, and frankly, if I could say, to show a corporate leadership that Tomlinson speaks, that they do. Now it's an opportunity to show it in a much bigger way than they have in the past. So,
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate your delegation. I don't see any other questions from my colleagues, but I will say that, yes, Councillor Gower and I are looking at drafting a joint letter together so we can support that community engagement going forward. So thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you very much.
Our next delegate, Rob Pierce and Neil DeRuiter from Tomlinson. So gentlemen, I'll invite you to come on down. We'll get your presentation up on the screen. Thank you very much for coming. 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Rob Pierce, Senior Vice President of the Tomlinson Group. With me today is Neil DeRuiter, our planning consultant from MHBC. I'll provide some very brief introductory comments and then we'll hand over to Neil. Tomlinson has been operating our existing Stittsville quarry for over 20 years and has done extensive ecological, surface water, and groundwater monitoring on site during this time frame. We strongly feel that we are putting forward an innovative and very well thought out plan that will see 158 acres of natural features created through progressive rehabilitation, more than exists on site today. Since filing our application 3 years ago, we've had extensive efforts to address and resolve agency, public, and Indigenous comments. We have signed off after technical review by several agencies, including the RVCA, Ministry of the Environment, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Ministry of Transportation, Archaeological Sign-Off, Hydro Ottawa, and today a City of Ottawa staff recommendation for zoning and OPA approval. This application before committee today is part of a parallel process under the Aggregate Resources Act, where we're also applying for our quarry license to be issued by the Ministry of Natural Resources, which normally won't happen until the land is zoned appropriately. Once we have the license, it's much like a driver's license, where if we aren't following license requirements, including regular monitoring and reporting, we can face penalties and even suspension of the license. This is a key part of Tomlinson's business, which we take very seriously. I'll now hand it over to Neil to provide a few more details.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, Chair Brown, members of VRAC. If I can go to the third slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, perfect. So as Rob noted, these applications were submitted just over 3 years ago. So this included a license application to the province under the Aggregate Resource Act. Just a couple things about the proposal itself. This is not an increase in the amount of extraction that's proposed. The tonnage limit that's currently in place for their existing quarry, which is outlined in blue, remains the same. The haul route remains the same, and the truck entrance remains the same. Next slide, please. With respect to the zoning amendment, a couple things that I do want to highlight, and as staff noted, several portions of this site are already zoned for extraction. They're already included within the city's bedrock resource area. The majority of the site would be rezoned from rural to mineral extraction. The environmental protection zone limits had already previously been updated to reflect the approved limits of the Goulburn Wetland Complex. Next slide, please. A little bit about the operation itself, and I do want to sort of speak to some of the comments that you've heard this morning. It's really important to note this is a 100+ hectare site. does not get all extracted at one time, doesn't get stripped and disturbed all at one time. There is a phasing plan. There are limits in terms of how much of an area can be open before rehabilitation has to occur. So when we're talking about the on-site wetlands that are located on the property, they remain in place until they're required for extraction. Progressive rehabilitation has to follow as each phase of extraction is completed. Next slide, please. Specific change we wanted to highlight is a proposal to immediately create wetlands in the southeast corner of the site. This has been done in consultation and collaboration both with agencies and Indigenous communities. It allows for the creation of just over 5 acres of wetlands immediately. With respect to the overall proposal, we think this offers a great opportunity for partnerships, education, but then also understanding wetland creation and how it's working on the landscape. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the final rehabilitation plan. You'll see the south half of the site is focused on the creation of woodlands and the wetland features. And importantly, the design that we've come up with respect to the rehabilitation, a lot of work has gone into it, a lot of consultation with partners, with members of the public, with review agencies, with Indigenous communities. And one of the important principles that I do want to highlight is that it does meet the city's requirement for no net loss. So currently there's about 113 acres of natural features on site. And through rehabilitation, that will be increased to 159 acres. And on this slide here, we do have the breakdown for the features. Next slide, please.
Now, Neil, it was my fault. I neglected to give you your 1 minute warning, but I'll give you about a minute and a half to wrap up if you could.
Thank you, Chair Brown. I'll be very quick on the changes and highlight the key ones. Specifically with respect to the changes that have occurred over the last 3 years, there has been a lot of work paid attention with respect to rehabilitation. How does it occur in a quick manner? What are the mechanisms in place to ensure that's occurring? What are the monitoring and mitigation aspects from that? That's been reflected in the plans. As Rob noted, there's been significant number of sign-offs through the technical reviewers. And there's also been additional monitoring placed with respect to groundwater, blasting, surface water, all of which have been incorporated on the updated site plans. Next slide, please. In our opinion, this application is consistent with the provincial planning statement. It conforms with the city's official plan. You know, as we've noted, all agency and technical review comments that have been received through this application have been resolved. And ultimately, Tomlinson supports staff's recommendation to approve the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, Chair Brown, Rob and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for being here today. I wanted to see if you could expand a little bit on the drainage and water issues that were raised by a previous delegate in terms of directing water towards other properties and what the effect of that is. Can you expand a little on the drainage plan and ways that you can mitigate that effect?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, thank you for the question. You know, within this local landscape, drainage has been a significant consideration, right? There's no doubt that, you know, over the years, there have been issues with respect to the previous delegate. Ultimately, what happens with this quarry is the water that collects is discharged in the Goulburn wetland complex. And as part of that, it essentially acts as a stormwater management pond, and then the pump runs when it needs to. As part of that, there is what's called an environmental compliance approval, which monitors and regulates the amount of water that can flow into the wetland. Also, water quality considerations to go along with that. You know, as part of the drainage in the existing quarry operations, you know, there were studies undertaken to assess, you know, the impacts from the quarries, the impacts of the twinning of Highway 7, beaver activity. And the study that was undertaken on behalf of the city in and around 2016 or 2017 did conclude that the quarries were not contributing negatively with respect to downstream flooding. There's a variety of factors, you know, obviously to consider with respect to that. The other thing I would note with respect to this application and obviously expanding a footprint for the quarry, downstream drainage and flooding was certainly an area that the RVCA looked at. And we spent a lot of time working with the RVCA with respect to that to ensure that any of those impacts would be minimized. And certainly we're happy and pleased to be here today to see that the RVCA is happy with the plans and addressing those matters.
Thank you very much to both of you for being here.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I do have one question. When you talk about the license being like a driver's license, how it's not just a one and done, can you expand on that a little bit and talk about some of the requirements you need to meet in order to keep that license in good standing?
Through you to Chair Brown. Yeah, so if the city approves the zoning and, you know, the ministry would then be in a position where they could issue a license for the quarry. As soon as the site becomes licensed, it's then regulated by the province. So all site activities that are occurring on site are then regulated through the Ministry of Natural Resources. Things with respect to, you know, water, whether it's quality, quantity, or blasting or noise, then get regulated through Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So the one thing I would note, you know, specifically for this proposal, there's a lot that's been put on the site plans about monitoring and providing annual reports, mitigation plans, and all of that is included with respect to providing it to the province, but also ensuring that the city and RVCA and others are made aware of that. So I guess, Chair Brown, the simple way to look at it is any activities that occur on site then become regulated through the province. There are provisions under the Aggregate Resource Act to ensure that operators such as Tomlinson are following their site plans and their license. And certainly there's, you know, penalties that can be issued through the Aggregate Resource Act if they don't.
No, and thank you very much for that. And I think that's important context that this really is a provincial jurisdiction. We're in a provincial lane and we're playing our part, but ultimately this gets kicked back to the province. But
yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can add, we have an environmental compliance group internally at Tomlinson who goes out to sites, reviews sites, works with our operational teams to ensure compliance. We also submit annual compliance reports. So it is something that, you know, we are a large operator. You know, you might have seen a couple of red and white trucks around the city. So we take this very seriously. When I say it's table stakes, you know, if we're not operating in compliance, our business is drawn into jeopardy.
no, thank you very much, Vice Chair.
Sorry to jump back on the board. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments from Ms. Devinga, and I know that there's been communication between Tomlinson and the Friends of the Stittsville Wetland, and that perhaps it broke down at some point during the conversation. Could you comment on her requests and what may be possible in terms of continuing the conversation with the community on you know, moving forward with the application and what that could potentially look like from your perspective?
Councillor, through the chair, what I can say today, and that request was, you know, Ms. Devinga had verbally, you know, communicated that to me a few weeks ago, and then obviously we hear it here today. You know, I would like to see what, you know, what comes, you know, forward from the committee. You know, I think we're in a place here. We have done very extensive consultation over the past 3 years. And I think going forward, we'll see what letter comes in from you and the committee here today. And we'll take it under advisement at this point.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming out today. I will say that I've been very pleased with the communication between Tomlinson and my office, given this is in my ward, and I appreciate the openness and the willingness to engage with me when I've had concerns, to explain some of the documentation to make sure that I've at least been able to arrive here today with a more fully informed opinion. It doesn't always happen with other operators in the city, and I do really appreciate the opportunities that we've had over the past few months to engage on this. So thank you very much. I'll ask city staff to come back to the table. Dr. Stowe, I think you're here. There you are. I'll ask Dr. Stowe to come to the table just in case there are any questions with regards to the wetlands and some of the more sensitive components to this. So I'll ask my colleagues if there are any questions to city staff. Vice Chair.
Obviously, this committee is no stranger to contentious applications on things, and there's been a few in my ward as well, and related to this, obviously, well, actually one very similar. one thing that we've discussed on some of them, not related to quarries, but I wanted to see if that was an option moving forward, or if it's something that the city is thinking about, or if it's even in the city's lane, given the provincial role. Community benefit funds and those types of benefits for the community that are most affected by these types of applications. Is that something that's considered when it comes to mineral extraction or that world at all? And if not, is that something that would be considered in the future if it's even within the municipality's wheelhouse to implement something like that?
Chair, I can offer that the ministry has certainly laid the expectation that they are the authority on aggregates. It's been made very clear to municipalities across the province. I'd certainly encourage legal to speak to that. Within the aggregate licensing framework, there is a provision where there is a contribution to city roads through that, but it's standardized and set. But certainly if there's legal comment about our authority to implement something like that, I'd encourage legal to provide that.
Thank you very much for your explanation, Mr. Moody.
Question, we've heard a little bit about the two different streams, two levels of government. Can staff provide a little bit more context about the city's lane? What is the municipality required to do in this situation?
Thank you, Chair. So our role in this is the official plan amendment application and the zoning bylaw amendment application. And basically we're looking at can the land support the use that's being proposed, and does it align with the applicable policies under the PPS? And then does the zoning align with the official plan? So we're really looking at can the parcel itself or can the land itself support the proposed use?
And I'll add, Chair, that extraction sites are not subject to site plan approval as other types of projects are within the city, and that, you know, when you refer to staying in your lane, essentially the site plan approval process that municipally usually we would do is done through the Aggregate Resource Act extraction license.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And Dr. Stowe, during Cass's presentation, she talked about the wetlands, and you're a trained and certified wetland evaluator. Can you speak to some of the work that you did on this file to inform staff's recommendation?
Yes, Chair. First, as was referred to in the presentation, historically I did do some work on this property when the status of the wetlands on it were being considered by the province. I was asked to come in and provide an opinion on whether the wetlands on the property qualified as significant or not. It was a matter of interest to the city, so I agreed to come in and provide opinion, and I provided the opinion that the wetlands on this property should not be included within the Goulburn Wetland Complex. That opinion was ultimately accepted by the Ontario Land Tribunal and formed a basis of the tribunal's opinion that the wetland should no longer be deemed as part of the wetland complex, and so would no longer be significant. I have provided some advice to planning on the application of provincial policy to the current application, particularly the assessment of no negative impacts on the other wetlands and natural features. And the province provides very clear guidance on how we assess no negative impacts with respect to quarries. There is an exception that says that when assessing impacts of quarries, we may consider progressive long-term rehabilitation of the site where feasible. And it is certainly, in my opinion, feasible in this case. And so it's my opinion that the application has met that provincial requirement.
No, thank you very much for that. I appreciate the explanation. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much to staff for the work you've put into this and the work you've done here today. I'll just remind the committee that we have received some written correspondence, and that's been uploaded to the SharePoint folder. The report recommendation reads as follows: that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, 1, recommend council approve an amendment to Schedule B9, Schedule C11A, and Schedule C11B of the official plan as detailed in document 2. Number 2, recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for part of 635 Jenkinson Road and part of 891 Jenkinson Road, as shown in document 3 and detailed in document 4 to permit a quarry expansion. 3, recommend council direct staff to incorporate an amendment into the new comprehensive zoning bylaw 2026-6-50 for part of 635 Jenkinson Road and part of 891 Jenkinson Road as detailed in document 5. And 4, approve the consultation details section of this report. Colleagues, are the report recommendations carried? Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who came out today to delegate on this item. Our next item is 5.1, draft economic development rural plan. Vice Chair, I believe you have a motion you'd like to read in at this time.
I do. I will read it in, and then I have a couple questions about it, if that's okay. Yeah.
Sure, I'll get staff to come up to the table.
Be it resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve that the rules of procedure be waived, subject to subsection 83(4)(a) of the procedure bylaw to receive a staff presentation on the draft economic development rural plan.
Thank you. Colleagues, is that carried? Thank you very much, Vice Chair. While we tee up the presentation, why don't you go ahead and ask?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I obviously was willing to move this so that we could have this today, but I was a little confused as to how we ended up there the day before the committee. So can we just explain how this process went and why we're waiving the rules today?
I can share. So the rule that we're waiving is just that presentations generally that aren't accompanied by a report require a waiver. My understanding is the point of the presentation today is to give an overview of the plan, to allow a consultation period, and that a report would follow. So the only waiver we're doing is that a report hasn't been provided at this point, but it will be provided subsequently. So that's the only part that we're waiving, is that there's no accompanying report at this time. One is expected later in the process.
Okay, and there was originally a report attached to it, right? So because that is no longer there and a report is coming at another meeting, that is why we're waiving the rules? Yes.
Correct,
Okay.
correct, Chair. Today, we're presenting the draft plan for you. We're then going to proceed with a 30-day public consultation, which we'll describe in a bit more detail through the presentation, and look forward to bringing back a final plan for committee's consideration on May 7th.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Jamie, Ian, the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Hurst. I'm the Program Manager of Economic Development in the Strategic Initiatives Department. Joining me today is my colleague Ian Scott, Economic Development Officer and the lead on this file. We're pleased to be here to provide a presentation on the draft Economic Development Rural Plan. Next slide, please. The Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan approved by Council in April 2024 identified rural economic development as a priority and committed to updating the 2020 Rural Economic Development Strategy to reflect emerging economic priorities. While economic fundamentals are shared across urban and rural contexts, rural or Ottawa businesses experience distinct challenges and opportunities, requiring approaches that are tailored to rural realities and developed in collaboration with rural businesses. Next slide, please. The draft Economic Development Rural Plan builds on past initiatives, including the development of the Rural Business Toolkit, rural tourism itineraries, rural internet connectivity advocacy, and the creation of Ottawa's Innovation Farm, formerly known as the Smart Farm, operated by Invest Ottawa. It aligns with municipal, provincial, and federal strategies and policy directions and reflects the outcomes of the 2024 Ottawa Rural Summit, which reinforced the importance of improving rural service delivery, strengthening rural representation, and establishing dedicated rural leadership within city departments. Next slide, please. The draft rural plan has been developed through a process that combines research, data analysis, and consultation, ensuring that the draft plan is evidence-informed, grounded in local perspectives, and aligned with the city's priorities. Next slide, please. The plan focuses on the 5 rural wards. As part of the research and data phase, we looked at who lives and works in rural Ottawa.
About 17% of the city's population lives in rural areas. Rural Ottawa is economically active, with strong incomes and higher than average rates of self-employment, reflecting strong culture of entrepreneurship. At the same time, the population is aging, which underscores the importance of policies that support workforce development and business succession. Next slide, please. The rural economy is anchored in 4 key industries: agriculture, tourism and recreation, retail and services, and development and construction, each playing an important role in supporting rural Ottawa's growth and vitality. Our review of these sectors helped identify priority areas of opportunity, which we'll highlight more shortly. Next slide, please. More than 40 one-on-one interviews were conducted with various interest holders, including rural councillors, business owners, business improvement areas, community organizations, and city departments. Input from these discussions was consolidated to identify shared themes, key challenges, and emerging opportunities. Next slide, please. Consultations highlighted that infrastructure gaps are limiting rural business growth and tourism. We also heard that planning frameworks and city policies don't always reflect rural realities. On marketing and promotions, interest holders feel that many urban residents and visitors don't know about the attractions and businesses in rural Ottawa. They emphasize that coordinated marketing and promotion would help increase visitor traffic and spending. For the agri-food sector, interest holders shared that long-term viability depends on diversification, value-added production, and supporting farm succession. We also heard optimism about growth potential in tourism, film, and events, sectors that could expand with the right supports. And finally, interest holders shared the need for stronger peer networks and more localized service delivery. There is a clear interest in piloting decentralized support models that can be tested in rural communities and scaled over time. Next slide, please. Insights from the research and consultations inform the draft's vision, strategic priorities, and recommendations, all aimed at the goal of fostering a strong rural economy that reflects the realities, priorities, and character of rural businesses and communities. Next slide, please. The draft rural plan contains 12 recommendations that would be implemented within existing economic development services resources, beginning in 2026 and continuing through 2027. For each recommendation, we provided actions as well as identified the key consultation themes being addressed. The first recommendation is to establish a permanent rural business liaison position within economic development services. This individual will lead implementation of the rural plan and, importantly, serve as a clear, direct point of contact for all rural business needs. The second recommendation is to collaborate with the Rural Affairs Office to strengthen the integration of rural business perspectives. Actions include establishing a process to assess and incorporate rural economic impacts and considerations into relevant city initiatives, as well as reviewing rural commercial development applications, highlighting their economic implications to inform decision-making. The third recommendation is to pilot the delivery of decentralized business support services across all rural wards. We're looking to host quarterly in-person business pop-up clinics in each ward, and we'll be doing so in coordination with service delivery partners such as Invest Ottawa's Small Business Entrepreneurship Center, as well as the city's Business Ambassador Service. The fourth recommendation is to strengthen engagement with rural businesses to address economic challenges and connect them to city supports. For this, we're proposing to establish a volunteer rural business advisory group that meets once a quarter, as well as to contribute more information on rural business services, programs, and opportunities through the Rural Affairs e-newsletter. Next slide, please. Recommendation 5 is to collaborate with local business associations to facilitate networking and mentoring opportunities. 6 is to strengthen marketing and promotions of rural Ottawa in collaboration with Ottawa Tourism and our colleagues in city communications. 7 is to secure provincial and federal funding for projects that support rural business growth and expansion. And 8 is to promote rural Ottawa as a filming destination in collaboration with our partners at the Ottawa Film Office. Next slide, please. Recommendation 9 is to promote rural Ottawa as a destination for corporate and entertainment events, including weddings. 10 is to commission a baseline evaluation and benchmark study of Ottawa's rural economy in order to inform future programming and services in this area. 11 is to assess competitiveness and capacity of employment lands to support projected economic growth and identify locations for future industrial development. And finally, recommendation 12 is to explore expanded on-farm diversified uses to simplify ancillary development and strengthen long-term farm viability. Next slide, please. Following today's presentation and meeting, the draft plan will be posted to Engage Ottawa for a 30-day public comment period in order to provide rural businesses and other interest holders with an opportunity to review and provide feedback on the draft recommendations and actions. Staff will consolidate and consider the feedback received and look forward to returning to ARAC with a final version of the plan for consideration at the May 7th meeting. We look forward to bringing forward a focused, action-oriented plan that reduces barriers, builds on rural strengths, supports emerging opportunities, and lays a strong foundation for future rural economic development programs and services. That concludes our presentation, and we'd be pleased to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skalski.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for this work on this plan. There's a lot of good material here, and I appreciate the effort to move from broad goals to actions. I want to recognize some positives right away. The idea of permanent rural business liaison is really important. Having a champion that'll make connections and proactively reach out to businesses across rural Ottawa will certainly fill a gap, and it's something that I'm hearing is desperately needed. I'm also really happy that this draft will be published on Engaged Ottawa. So I think stakeholders having the opportunity to shape the final plan will be really important. This is a good place to start and build from. I have several suggestions to offer that reflect the conversations that I've had with business owners and community leaders, which I'll share with you as part of the consultation process over the next several weeks. But also I'll share a couple of highlights here today. The plan, in my view, still feels heavy on support and promotion and light on barrier removal. The consistent message that I get from rural businesses is the need to remove barriers that stop investment from happening in the first place. So these barriers are very specific. There's zoning constraints, approval timelines, fees, servicing limitations, inconsistent interpretation, gaps in the experience with well and septic innovations. So the final plan will really need to tackle this. Also in this draft, I don't yet see a clear Main Street rebuild pathway for legacy village lots that are constrained by servicing rules. So we do need a strategy to reinvigorate our main streets, as barriers do kill projects before they start. So also the plan notes that implementation will be within existing resources. I think we need to be explicit about what we can afford and what needs more resources and build in a mechanism to be either that through a budget ask in the future years or to identify how our plan matches up with grants and really actively solicit those funds. I'm really pleased that the need to build up data was included in this draft. So we certainly need information to inform our decision-making around growth. We also need to build a way that progress is regularly reported to ARAC. So I think it's really important to send a message that we're serious about change. The rural community has seen plans and strategies before, but they'll need signs that this one's different. So I do have a few questions for you. So I did recently dust off the 2020 Rural Economic Development Strategy and see that it includes a suite of actions that were outlined for the immediate and long term that are similar to what's being presented here. Can you tell me what actions have been taken since the draft was developed in 2020?
Chair, I can help, excuse me, I'm getting a bit of a cold. I can help respond to that. So Jamie mentioned a few of them at the beginning. So they were the rural tourism itinerary type work. So that piece with Ottawa Tourism attracting residents. We did quite a lot of work on rural connectivity, so internet connectivity, that piece as well. We developed the toolkit for businesses in rural areas. And there was also some work on the diversified farm uses. That plan was brought forward during COVID, so it took a little bit of time to get it up and running. I think the focus that we're trying to switch to here, where it's very sort of project-based, is much more of a kind of comprehensive boots on the ground, like you spoke to with the rural business liaison, and some more sustained rural economic development rather than that kind of piecemeal project-based.
Thanks. I think that's good. I think there's certainly value in having a person dedicated to that kind of outreach. And I've heard that, certainly we've heard that, Ian, as well. I have another question. What kind of data are we collecting today to help us understand the rural economy? And are we collecting any? I get the impression that we're still baselining.
So we're not, the data that we're relying on for the development of this draft plan is primarily Statistics Canada data that we're accessing through Environics.
I'm certainly thinking always about the decisions that we're going to take about growth in rural Ottawa. And if we don't have the data to help inform those kinds of decisions, I fear that we're going to miss the mark. So I'm glad to hear that we're looking ahead to building up that data base. Can you clarify how many FTEs work on economic development for the City of Ottawa today?
Chair, so we're split up. We have 8 economic development officers, so they focus on all our economic development work, whether it's economic diversification, BIAs, or knowledge-based industries, working with our partners. And then also as part as economic development services, we have the nightlife office, the 200th anniversary office, and also the Byward Market office around the Byward Market Public Realm Plan, but the core group in economic development is 10 people.
So this would add a new person to that team, essentially dedicated.
No, what we'd be doing is taking one position and just dedicating that person to rural work.
Okay. And so can you clarify how different that role is from the rural affairs office sort of work?
Yeah, so that role would be primarily outreach, more on the pure ACDEV stuff. So working with the businesses, working directly with the BIAs with the focus on investment attraction, business support, but of course working hand in hand with the rural affairs office, but very kind of that ACDEV business focus.
And can you just confirm, does Invest Ottawa, or maybe, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but do you know whether Invest Ottawa has a dedicated rural business support today, akin to what other rural Ontario municipalities get from the Community Futures Development Corporations?
No, they do not.
They do not? No. Okay, so I'm trying to understand whether we're kind of building from scratch or we have something to build on. So it sounds like there might be opportunity there.
Yes, correct. They don't have a debt. They do kind of citywide. The only thing that would be dedicated to rural is the smart farm and the innovation farm, but nothing directly in the rural area. So what the plan is proposing is taking some of that support from Invest Ottawa, getting out into the rural areas in a quarterly, meeting fashion. And then if we feel and we're getting the uptake that we need, I think at that point it would be bringing forward for future consideration whether we need more dedicated support beyond kind of those quarterly meetings and those supports. Because of the size of Ottawa, I think it makes the distribution of all those services difficult. And we know from consultation, a lot of the businesses don't know about Invest Ottawa or think they're mostly tech-based. So there is some work to do there to get them out there.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm going to leave it there. So I appreciate the work done to get us to this draft. I'm seized with our declining villages and the loss of our banks. We heard at the Rural Summit how important it is to move the needle on rural economic development. I think this is our chance to prove that we're listening and to act, of course. Rural residents and businesses expect a final plan that reflects rural input, is actionable, and that builds in accountability. So we can't go another 25 years without seeing measurable improvements. This is really important stuff, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I see that Roddy Bolivar is in the audience. He is the Executive Director of the Carpro Corridor BIA, and amongst other initiatives and concerns they have around economic development in rural Ottawa. One thing that often gets brought up is the need for transportation in rural areas, and in particular in the Carpro Corridor, to serve those businesses and get employees to those businesses. What have you been hearing as you've been making the rounds in rural Ottawa and discussing these issues with stakeholders? And what do you see in terms of potential solutions for that in the future? Or do you think that this plan will be able to address that gap that needs to be filled?
Chair, we absolutely heard through the consultations that transportation is a challenge. It's a challenge for employees getting to places of work in our rural communities. It's also a challenge for residents and visitors who want to frequent businesses and attractions that are in those rural communities. We've identified and we highlighted that. We heard that through our consultations. This transportation, of course, is not our wheelhouse per se here in economic development. Well, everything is very interconnected. We're very available and we'll look to speak to or connect with our colleagues in transportation services to explore opportunities to address some of these challenges. And I think having the establishment of the Rural Business Liaison Officer, who can really be that point of contact in-house at the city for rural business needs, will be really helpful in that regard.
Well, I know there's a few people in the audience today, including Mr. Scrimger, who may have some feedback to tie into that discussion as well. My second question, I'm not sure exactly who it's for. This is in regards to the rural office. So that was something that came out of the Rural Summit, was bolstering that office. We've doubled the capacity in that office very recently on what would be an ARAC meeting, without pointing out Laurel McCrate in the audience. Just wanted to throw that out there. So where will this person work from? Will they work in the rural office? And if that's not the plan, do you think that could be achieved so that rural residents and rural business owners have a one-stop shop for all things rural? Do you think that's possible?
The Rural Affairs Office is located within the PDBS, the Planning, Development and Building Services Department. Economic Development Services is located within the Strategic Initiatives Department. We are proposing to have this Rural Business Affairs Liaison acting within our Economic Development Services team in the Strategic Initiatives Department. We are the experts on all things economic development in the city. This is a draft rural economic development plan. Of course, that position will work hand in hand with our colleagues in the Rural Affairs Office. We already do, and we'll be looking to strengthen that relationship going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation today. And I just want to have you repeat what the plan is for the next month. So can you talk about where this is going and how folks can engage on it, please?
Certainly, Chair. So following today's meeting, we'll be posting the draft plan in full on Engage Ottawa for a period of 30 days. There will be an opportunity for all rural businesses, residents, and other organizations to comment on the draft recommendations. Staff will then take all of that feedback and look forward to bringing forward a final plan to this committee on May 7th for your consideration.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to engage. I know we're all excited to see what comes forward. Colleagues, can we receive this presentation for information?
Received.
Thank you. Now, if everyone will just bear with me, I'd like to hold the next few items. Item 6.1, We'll hold that for a second. Jumping to item 7.1 amendments to align with the transportation master plan and the official plan. There are no presentations. I don't believe there's a will of committee to hold this item. So if it is the will of the committee, the report recommendations are that Planning and Housing Committee and the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve and adopt the official plan amendments as presented in document 1 to implement the recommendations of the council approved transportation master plan. B, approve amendments as shown in document 4 of this report to the new zoning bylaw 2026-50 following approval of the official plan amendment to correct neighborhood zoning details in those areas where evolving neighborhood overlays has been removed or newly extended. And 2, that the Planning and Housing Committee and the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation details section is in this report. Is this item carried? Thank you. We're going to hold item 7.2 because we do have a delegation. Item, pardon me, 7.3, the Rural Community Building Grant Program grant application review. It looks like this is a very pan-rural item today, never contentious. We're always pleased to see it come forward, and we've got Mr. Thompson here with us today. However, colleagues, I believe there might be a will to carry this on consent, and so the report recommendation are that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the recommendations on the Rural Community Building Grants Program application as detailed in document 1. Is this item carried? Thank you. Item 7.4, the 2025 annual report pursuant to the Building Code Act. It was a real page turner. However, there may be a willingness of committee to carry this as well. So the report recommendations are that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee receive this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Efficiency unknown to government. We will go back to item 6.1. I think the team is still here. Dr. Stowe, Tara, welcome back. Long time no see. I'll have you go through your presentation and brief remarks, and then we do have 2 delegates signed up. So we'll go into questions from delegates and then questions to staff. So Tara, Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and councillors. My name is Tara Redpath, and I'm a senior planner with our Natural Systems team in the City's Strategic Initiatives Department. I'm joined today by Nick Stowe, who is Program Manager of Natural Systems. And we're here today to speak about an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment concerning 2 wetlands in the rural area. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to begin by providing some context on wetland policies in the province of Ontario and how this is related to the city's policies. The amendments that we're recommending today are required to maintain consistency with provincial policy regarding significant wetlands. The province is responsible for identifying significant wetlands based on evaluations conducted under the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, or OES, as we sometimes refer to it. Once significant wetlands have been identified, municipalities are required to include them in their official plans and to protect them. If the province approves a change to the status or boundary of a significant wetland using the OES criteria, then the municipalities are required to amend their official plans accordingly. Next slide, please. I'd like to just highlight some additional information on provincially significant wetlands, or PSWs, in Ontario. So all wetlands provide multiple environmental, social, and economic benefits, such as the provision of wildlife habitat, water quality protection, and flood risk reduction. PSWs are subject to the highest standard of environmental protection under provincial and municipal planning policies. Development and site alteration are not permitted within PSWs. Wetlands in Ontario are significant if they meet minimum scoring thresholds that are established under the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. Now, in 2022, the province brought forward a series of changes to the OES that make it easier for designated PSWs to be re-evaluated and reclassified as non-provincially significant. The amendments that are proposed in today's report have been triggered by wetland reevaluations that were initiated by private landowners. Next slide, please. So this report proposes to amend the status of one evaluated wetland, and it also describes a minor modification to the boundaries of a second wetland. One area of the broader Goulburn wetland complex near Fluellen Road, representing just under 75 hectares, has been reevaluated. The status of this wetland area changed from provincially significant to non-provincially significant. In the second case, the boundary of the Richmond Fen has been re-examined and adjusted in one area adjacent or near Conley Road. The wetland evaluation and wetland boundary review, as I mentioned earlier, were initiated by private landowners, and they're related to their privately owned property. These changes have been accepted by the Provincial Ministry of Natural Resources, and they've been published in the provincial mapping. The official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment would align the city's official plan schedules and the zoning bylaw provisions with these provincial updates and are required under the policies of our official plan. Next slide, please. I just want to also provide clarification on Conservation Authorities Act. The amendments addressed by this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment do not affect the ability of the conservation authorities to continue regulating the wetlands under their Conservation Authorities Act. CAs are required to regulate any wetlands connected to a watercourse, whether the wetland is identified as significant or not. A permit from the CA is required for any development or site alteration in or within 30 meters of wetlands. Both wetlands that are addressed in today's report fall within the jurisdiction of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. RVCA staff have confirmed that the 75 hectares of evaluated wetland along Fluellen Road remains regulated and subject to permitting requirements for any development activity in or within that 30-meter buffer. In the case of the Richmond Fen, the RVCA will no longer regulate the area that was removed from the boundary, but of course it will continue to regulate the the Richmond Fen itself. Next slide, please. Although the status of PSW reflects the highest conservation standard for wetlands in Ontario, the wetlands that are non-significant still do have some protections. Under the policies of the city's official plan, development and site alteration in a natural heritage system core areas must demonstrate no negative impact. Any development activities must maintain or enhance the integrity, biodiversity, and ecosystem services of these core areas. Over 98% of existing PSWs in Ottawa fall within these core areas. And these natural heritage system policies also apply even if a wetland has been reevaluated and found to be non-provincially significant. So any development, in addition to that, any development or site alteration that is proposed within or adjacent to the wetlands, regardless of their status, is subject to an environmental impact study, and it must demonstrate no negative impact. And one final point is that wetlands are considered to be open files. New evaluations or reevaluations can be undertaken at any time. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to put on the screen the maps that highlight the locations of the proposed amendments. So on the left, the subject area for the Goulburn Wetland Complex is located near Fernbank Road and Fluellen Road, and it's approximately 4.5 kilometers west of Stittsville. On the right side of the screen for the Richmond Fen, this boundary update is located near Copeland Road and Conley Road, roughly 3.3 kilometers west of Richmond. The maps there show areas outlined in a thick black line. This shows the existing significant wetland areas that will be removed. Remaining PSWs are shown in the light gray wetland symbols. These significant wetlands that are removed will still be included as natural heritage features under the policies of our official plan. That is because both areas also have significant woodlands, and the Goulburn Wetland Complex remains a mapped surface water feature. These areas also remain part of the Natural Heritage System core area, as I outlined earlier. And then finally, the zoning will change from environmental protection, or EP3, to rural countryside, RU, to align with the surrounding lands. And last slide, please. So I just want to thank you today for the opportunity to provide this presentation, and Nick and I would be pleased to answer any questions following the delegations.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Janet to come back down. Janet's our first delegate, followed by Sarah.
Thank you again, Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak with you this morning on the continuing theme of the diminishing protection for wetlands across our city. On September 5th, 2024, the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands spoke to this committee about the importance of wetland protection, intrinsic to many of your multidisciplinary plans and policies of the city, including most recently the Climate Ready Ottawa Strategy. We are here again today because the ecological health and the diverse functionality of our wetlands across our city, and in particular the Goulburn Wetland Complex, continue to be threatened by policy changes implemented by a provincial government in 2022. You may recall, as Tara stated, that along with a host of other proposed legislation and regulatory policy changes purporting to support Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan, the Government of Ontario implemented a new weakened system for identifying and designating provincially significant wetlands. The consequences of this weakened evaluation system are severe and are continuing to roll out across our city. Showing here on this figure is actually the entire Goulburn Wetland Complex before all these changes. The new Ontario Wetland Evaluation System came into effect on January 1st, 2023. If you can go to slide 2, please. On March 2024, 55 hectares of the 961 hectares of Goulburn Wetland Complex lost its provincial significant designation and the strong provincial protection that that designation imparts. Now, due to the revised and weakened wetland evaluation system, another 74.58 hectares, over 184 acres of this wetland have lost their PSW designation and the strong protection that that designation imparts. If you can go to slide 2 for a moment. And you can, okay, sorry, slide 2 actually shows the 55 acres, and that would be in the gold area, as well as if I had a pointer, you could actually see the wetlands from the Ontario Lands Tribunal too. So if you could just choose to slide 3, please. And you can see these are the the approximately 75 hectares on the lower center side of the slide highlighted in gold. The rural staff report states that these amendments modify small areas of Schedule B9, the rural transit, and Schedule C, the natural heritage system of the official plan. These are not small changes. Rather, these changes represent 14% of the Goulburn Wetland Complex losing its PSW designation and that protection that that designation imparts. That's over 1/5 of the wetland complex. A wetland complex that was once 961 hectares has been reduced to 831 hectares in less time than a 4-year municipal election cycle. This is death by 1,000 cuts. Referring again to the figure, if you look at the golden area, which is the approximately 75 hectares, I'm rounding it up, you'll also see green wetlands that are isolated now. Do not doubt that these wetlands will inevitably lose their PSW designation. It is only a matter of time. We can also not forget that in the eastern portion of our city, approximately 500 hectares of wetlands were never designated a provincially significant wetland in the first place when the South Bearbrook Wetland Evaluation transitioned to the weekend Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. We appreciate that this city continues to bring transparency to these changes through the committee meetings. We also appreciate that we have a wetland evaluation expert within the city to ensure conformity with the weakened system. However, we continue to dance around a more disconcerting issue. That is, we have normalized the fundamentally flawed provincial policy changes to the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, which is not based on science. Despite the city's implementation of the natural heritage features overlay to reflect this evaluated non-PSW wetland as a mapped surface water area, development or site alteration can and will be entertained in or adjacent to the natural heritage features, as long as the proposal is supported by environmental impact study prepared in accordance with the city's guidelines. So where development was once prohibited in provincially significant wetlands, we now have a situation in which an environmental impact study can be completed to facilitate development. Yet the intrinsic value of that wetland has not changed, only the bar in which the province unilaterally set. Do not be fooled. This is an endgame. The policy change by our provincial government in 2022 facilitates the conversion of provincially significant wetlands to non-provincially significant wetlands to enable development across our province. We are deluding ourselves if we think development will not proceed in one way or another in the other parts are the 75 hectares delisted. And when we lose wetlands, we will have irreversibly damage nature's very own nature-based climate solution. Please remember that also in April 2023, this council joined many other cities around this world in moving forward to sign the Montreal Pledge on Biodiversity. The pledge commits cities to 15 concrete actions for biodiversity, including conserving existing natural environments through protection and prioritizing ecosystem approaches. There is more work for the city to do to uphold this commitment. In September 2024, when we came here, we asked the committee to communicate to the government the adverse impacts of newly adopted and weakened Ontario Wetland Evaluation System for identifying and designating PSWs, while illustrating firsthand the changes we are seeing in our city. At that time, this committee chose not to take action. Now, a year and a half later, we ask you to reconsider this decision and speak out on behalf of the wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions from my colleagues, but thank you for coming out today. Sarah, welcome back.
Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you again for this second opportunity to speak with you on, of course, another very important topic related to conserving Ottawa's wetlands. And I'm again here to speak as Ontario Nature's Conservation Campaigns Coordinator, as I did for item 4.1. My goal in speaking on this second item is to challenge the narrative that the City of Ottawa must accept lesser protections for non-provincially significant wetlands, and to emphasize the opportunities to better protect these areas so that they may continue to benefit the community. As of course we just heard from Janet, the changes in wetland status being considered today are not an isolated occurrence. Rather, it is part of a worrying trend whereby some of Ottawa's most valuable wetlands are losing their provincially significant status and protection. This trend makes it all the more important that the city has strong policies in place to protect local wetlands, regardless of their status as provincially significant, locally significant, or otherwise. The staff report on the reclassification of these parts of the Goulburn Wetland Complex and the Richmond Fen acknowledges that the recommended official plan and zoning bylaw amendments will reduce the standard of environmental protection for these wetlands that have now lost their provincially significant status. However, the report also suggests that the city's official plan has already strong enough policies in place to protect non-provincially significant wetlands. I would argue, though, that based on today's approval of staff's recommendation to remove the natural features overlay, and rezone the site to facilitate expansion of Tomlinson-Stittsville Quarry at the expense of the wetlands present at that site, wetlands that were also once considered part of the provincially significant Goulburn Wetland Complex and that also provide extensive flood mitigation and groundwater services, there may be some room for improvement. The staff report also suggests that the recommended amendments reducing the standard of protection for these parts of the Goulburn Wetland Complex and the Richmond Fen are necessary to align with the provincial planning statement, but this is simply not the case. While the provincial planning statement does, of course, set minimum standards that only require municipalities to strictly protect provincially significant wetlands, it also empowers municipalities to establish local policies that go beyond these minimum standards. Many municipalities have already done this, including the City of Guelph, which defines a broad range of non-provincially significant wetlands for equally strict protection. Similar policies could be adapted to and applied in Ottawa, helping to better protect the city's incredibly valuable wetlands affected by the provincial changes. Not to mention, such changes could reduce the amount of time spent processing official plan and zoning bylaw amendments like these each time a wetland is reclassified under the provincial system. Alongside the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands, Ontario Nature is very keen to collaborate with the City of Ottawa to strengthen the city's approach to protecting local wetlands. Janet and I are very grateful to have started some really wonderful and productive conversations about this with several staff following joint recommendations that we submitted around enhancing the recognition and protection of wetlands for their contributions to natural climate resilience as part of the city's commitments under Climate Ready Ottawa strategy. And as you'll know, the value of these recommendations and continuing conversations with staff was also highlighted by Councillor Gower at the November 12th, 2025 City Council meeting. Through these conversations, we've been thrilled to learn of some of the wonderful upcoming initiatives to better understand, account for, and communicate the role of Ottawa's wetlands in securing a climate resilient future. However, we're also continuing to explore some key gaps in the city's current policies for protecting non-provincially significant wetlands and the opportunities to address those gaps so that all the climate resilience benefits that Ottawa's wetlands provide are maintained for current and future generations. I recognize that what we've shared today does not change the policy framework under which you will make your decision on this matter today. However, I hope that by highlighting the growing need and opportunity to enhance the city's current approach to protecting local wetlands and both of our groups' interest in supporting this process as collaborative partners, you will also see the importance of this work and consider supporting such initiatives should the opportunity arise. So thank you once again for your time.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We always appreciate hearing from you at committee. I'm not seeing any questions from my colleagues, so thank you very much. Yep, questions for staff are next. Councillor Skalski.
Just one question. Can you help me understand the no impact aspect of the policy itself?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so under the provincial planning statement, wetlands, whether they're provincially significant or not, are any development adjacent to a wetland must demonstrate no negative impact on that wetland. The assessment of no negative impacts depends a lot on the context. For provincially significant wetlands, we also have the prohibition on any development or site alteration within the wetland. So that's a much stronger protection. No negative impact standard. We have approached taking an Ottawa specific approach, recognizing Ottawa's context and recognizing that 2/3 of Ottawa is rural. So unlike the city of Guelph, we have an extensive rural area and we need to take an approach that reflects that. So we have identified a natural heritage system. That natural heritage system is strongly based on the provincial planning statement and the policies in that statement. And we have said that within that natural heritage system, we will take a very approach to the assessment of no negative impacts. So essentially, if you are changing the boundaries or the functions of that wetland in any way, that is a negative impact. That applies to 95% of the significant wetlands in Ottawa and 75% of the overall wetlands in Ottawa. Outside the natural heritage system, recognizing that we do have needs for rural economic development, we have agricultural needs, we have a variety of different needs. We have council's elected to take a more flexible approach that looks at an overall no net negative impact. And so we do allow mitigation and compensation outside of the natural heritage system when we evaluate the impacts on non-provincially significant wetlands.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, colleagues? Seeing none, the report recommendations are that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that Council approve the proposed amendments to the official plan as shown in Document 1 and detailed in Document 3. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that Council approve the proposed amendments to zoning bylaw 2008-250 as shown in Document 1 and detailed in Document 4. that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council direct staff to incorporate the proposed amendments into the new comprehensive zoning bylaw as detailed in document 4 and 5, and that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation details section of this report. I'll also note that we do have correspondence that has been uploaded to the shared drive. Colleagues, is this item carried? Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the team. All right, our next item, 7.2 minor zoning bylaw amendment, part of 6659 Franktown Road. There is a presentation if committee wishes to receive one. However, I haven't had that request. We do have one delegate signed up. We've got them up here in the gallery, so I'll invite you down to the table now. I will note, just for housekeeping, that there were 2 other delegates that had originally signed up to speak today. However, they've withdrawn their delegation. Jacob, Jeremy, welcome to committee. Appreciate the opportunity to engage with you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Brown. My name is Jacob Bolduc. I'm a planner with FOTEN Planning and Design in Ottawa, presenting this zoning bylaw amendment for 6659 Franktown Road. I don't have a long presentation. I think most of the meat and potatoes are at the end, but just on the title slide here, this is a view of the property from the road, from Franktown Road, as a bit of an introduction to the site. Next slide, please. So the site is located about 1.2 kilometers west of the village of Richmond along Franktown Road. The total site is significantly large. It's 40 hectares in size, but you can see we're talking mostly about the front of the property on Franktown Road, which has a frontage of approximately 90 meters. Next slide, please. It's a little fuzzy, but to explain a little bit of the history of the site, this is an aerial image from 2005 taken from Geo Ottawa on the left, and on the right is a more recent image from 2022. You'll note there's 3 main buildings on site. There's the single detached dwelling, the house, and then there's the garage structure, and what we call the coverall, sometimes known as a hoop house. You can see that the site over the last 20 years hasn't changed too much, but that the business air rock drilling was established on site circa 2004, 2005. And I'll get into that history in a bit of a minute, but the purpose of this slide was just to highlight that it's virtually the same 20 years later. Next slide, please. These are some images showing the property. You can see the driveway from Franktown Road. There's a couple pictures there of the single detached dwelling, which is owner occupied. So this is a proposal for a home-based business. The owner of the business sitting next to me lives in the main structure, the house, and operates the business out of the accessory buildings in the rear yard, which you can see on image number 4 there. And if we go to the next slide, there's also an image of the garage, which is labeled as image number 8. Next slide, please. So to summarize the application, first I'll go through air rock drilling. Again, it's a home-based business, owner-occupied main dwelling. It was established on site circa 2004, 2005. And the current owner, Jeremy, sitting next to me, acquired the site in 2017 along with the business. There's parking, storage, and office proposed on site. I apologize for the site plan showing a lot of gray. There's supposed to be 2 different kinds of green there, and if you can see it better on your screens, I hope so. Most of the site is not covered by gray. There's a small asphalted and gravel area, but most of the site remains naturalized, as you saw in the intro slide. It's important to note as part of the business that it's a home-based business that requires a lot of equipment, but the activities on site are fairly limited, as I mentioned, to the office, parking, and storage. There's no drilling on site. That would be counter to the nature of the business. So essentially, the drill trucks are moved off-site onto the job site, drill, and then when the job is done, they come back for storage and parking until they are sent out to the next job site. Just a quick note on lot coverage here. And again, I wish the 2-tone green showed up a little bit better, but the lot coverage proposed, according to this lot area, is around 7.69 between all 3 buildings. That's based on the rectangle that you're showing at 1.45 hectares. But it's important to note that the full site again at around 40 hectares, we'd be permitted approximately, a maximum of 5% of the lot as covered by accessory structures, which is about 2 hectares. So we're well under what's permitted in terms of how much building area is allowed to be on site. Next slide, please. With respect to the zoning bylaw quickly, the site is zoned RU, but there is a portion of the site to the rear, which is zoned EP3. One thing we did notice, actually, if we go to the next slide, it's in better detail. Through the zoning bylaw amendment application, we noticed that the conservation authority boundaries for the wetlands at the rear of the site, the EP3 zone. Not sure if we can get the next slide, please, or if it's just. Thank you. So you can see that the boundaries were actually changed a couple years ago, but the zoning bylaw didn't necessarily get the updated mapping. And so the first part of the proposal is just to have that mapping revised to match the current boundaries of the Conservation Authority's regulatory boundary. So that EP3 line is moving essentially just to the north. We just captured that as part of the application because we noticed a mismatching in the mapping. And if we have an application in the door, we might as well change that zoning boundary. Next slide, please. So the original proposal is essentially to establish a home-based business, but there's a couple different sections of the zoning bylaw that would apply, notably sections 127 and 128, which are specific to home-based businesses. And then there's a few other things through the zoning bylaw as well, but notably there's a restriction on the maximum area of a home-based business and how much space it can occupy within primary and accessory structures, a maximum amount of outdoor storage, a maximum number of heavy vehicles permitted to be parked, a cumulative number of heavy vehicles and trailers permitted, as well as provisions about the on-site storage of hazardous materials. So these were the 5 main sections of the bylaw that we were applying for relief. I've highlighted 3 of them in green because we reached a point where we're still seeking relief, except for the last one, I suppose. But we've managed to work with staff to lower our request. So originally we were proposing 6 large vehicles. We've decided to move 2 of those vehicles off-site. So there's only 4 large vehicles being parked on site. And the staff report does reflect that this would be supported by staff. The reason I've highlighted the maximum area of a home-based business, which we're proposing 670 square meters, in blue, is that as you've noted in the staff report, this remains the one item that we haven't been able to resolve with staff. They are proposing 320. So I want to go into a little bit of detail about that, which is on the next slide, actually. So going back to our site plan, I've highlighted a few different elements here, but the 670 that we had determined was based on the area of the garage structure, which is 320 square meters, plus about 70% of the 500 square meter coverall. Some things have changed, actually, and I'm happy to get into the details on this, but originally when we had 6 vehicles, that was the reason for requesting about 350 square meters of the coverall to be required, because those trucks would often be parked in the coverall. Those 2 trucks are being moved off-site at this point, and so we don't need as much space in the coverall as what was originally proposed. We only need about 20% of it. So that would be 100 square meters, which would take the numbers in the staff report. And I do appreciate that we didn't get the staff presentation, so I'm spending a little more time on this. They're proposing 320 square meters, which would be limited to the garage structure. We would also be asking for 20% outside of the current request for 70% to be used for storage of materials related to the business. So essentially what we're asking is part of that coverall to be used for part of the business, but we don't necessarily need the full 70% we were previously requesting. We'd be happy to reduce that to a total of 420 if the committee would be agreeable to such a request. Some of the other items highlighted here is the reinstatement of green space. We've also got the removal of some additional outdoor storage that was on site. That's now being limited to an area of 150 square meters and fenced as proposed. We're also looking to propose an acoustic barrier on sort of it's right where the blue arrow is located, actually. And that acoustic barrier is to provide some noise relief to the property to the southwest of the site. That could be in the form of a berm or an acoustic fence, depending on or actually in accordance with the noise study that was submitted in support of the application, and that's part of the holding symbol. So the reason I want to spend a little more time on the coverall, we can go to the next slide, please.
Just for clarification, I know you're both here and you've got 10 minutes, but I'll just let you keep going, and then if Jeremy has any comments when you're finished there.
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep my presentation focused on the application. And if there's any questions about the business or the operations, maybe we can take those during questions for Jeremy. So the coverall structure, I just wanted to note again that as noted in the staff report, there is currently no building permit for it, but there is an open building permit application. It's actually been open since about 2004 when the original building was proposed. And we've gone through the records and noted a file number that essentially they had submitted for building permit. It was flagged at zoning that the structure at the time was too close to one of the previous property lines. There's since been a merger of properties. And so the coverall building was located too close to the rear property line. The zoning plans examiner had flagged this as part of the review of the building permit. So we know there was an open building permit. It just seems that building permit was never closed. As part of that zoning review, there was a minor variance decision to permit the coverall structure as proposed with a reduced setback to that previous property line. And I don't know what happened. This was 2004, 2005, well before my time, but the building permit was never closed. So recently, as part of this process through the zoning bylaw amendment, it's been noted that the City of Ottawa staff, I believe from Building Code Services, attended the site, said, hey, we've noticed we have this open building permit. We're looking to close it. The owners since then have provided the original stamped building drawings by an engineer. They've been uploaded into the system, but that permit is not yet closed, but we do hope to have it closed. The reason I bring this up is that the coverall structure is not currently permitted, but it could be permitted. There's no maximum number of accessory buildings on a rural property. And as I mentioned earlier, the lot coverage is considerable. So we're not running into any zoning constraints from that perspective. All we would be asking is for the recommendations of staff to be updated to reflect that a small portion of the coverall building, of course, subject to receiving that building permit, be reflected so that certain materials can be stored in the coverall. There are outdoor storage that's required as part of this business, but there's also a certain amount of indoor storage. And because the vehicles, the 4 trucks that are on site have to be parked on the garage, in the garage, a small portion of the coverall building does have to be used for the business in order to allow for storage of concrete and other things that just have to stay dry. So if the trucks need to stay in the garage because they can't be outside in the winter, then we just need a small portion of the coverall to be permitted through that building permit application to be allowed for use of the business for the storage of some materials. I think that covers it. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know this has been a long road for the applicant and for the neighbors. So I'm pleased that we're here today and I hope we find some resolution. For me, the important component of this is to ensure that not only can the applicant adhere to the conditions that are being recommended for approval, but that this will address the concerns that residents around the area have raised. So Jeremy, are you confident that you can operate the business within the permissions that are being recommended for approval here today, and you'll be able to do that while running a successful business in the village?
Yes, now that we've been able to move 2 trucks off property, we're able to downsize enough to still service the community, but be able to run functionally.
And I appreciate the work that you've done to get to this point. And, you know, you have put a lot of water in your wine, and I'm pleased to see that I think we're to a point where there's a good compromise. And if all parties are going away from the table, not completely satisfied, but with enough to make the deal work, I think we've probably found the sweet spot. So I don't have any further questions for you, but I do appreciate the opportunity to engage the work that you've done to get here to address the concerns of both the city and the neighbors around the property. So thank you. Colleagues, are there any other questions for the delegates? No? Thank you very much. I do have one question for the planning team. Thank you very much. Welcome. So we received a pretty comprehensive presentation. We see where staff and the applicant were able to align, and there's one component left over. Can you go into a little bit more detail about why we weren't able to square that circle?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Yes, so we have had extensive discussions with the applicant, specifically regarding to the size that they are proposing. Part of staff's justification for the 320 meter squared proposal that staff is recommending is because it would be able to be effectively contained within that permitted garage that has a building permit for it. Partially, that's the reason. The other reason is given the proximity to the neighbors, expanding far beyond that, as proposed with the 600 original proposal and now the revised proposal, we are still expanding beyond that limit that we are recommending. And it has a greater potential for causing, we'll say, the nuisance to these neighboring properties that have been flagged to us as a concern. So that was the point of differentiation between staff's recommendation and the applicant's proposal, and a little bit of the basis for our concern, and as well as was highlighted. Although the coverall building is established and existing today, there was never a building permit issued for it. And it is staff's opinion that there was a reason that it wasn't issued beyond just the minor variance, so.
No, and I appreciate that. And with the recommendation that's before us today, nothing would absolve the business going forward should committee recommend to council to approve this. That existing sections of various bylaws that govern home-based businesses and those nuisance issues that we often hear about, nothing in this recommendation would absolve the applicant from having to meet those requirements, correct?
Yes, that is correct, through you, Chair. Section 127, one of the zoning bylaw is one of the sections that regulate home-based businesses. And in that section, it describes the types of nuisances that could arise from home-based businesses, meaning noise, dust, vibration, all of those concerns. We are not recommending any changes to that provision, and any future operation of the business would have to comply with that provision.
Perfect, thank you. And we heard from the applicant that they believe they can satisfy those conditions that are listed in this report. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I've heard great work about the work you've done here today. So I always appreciate having the opportunity to engage. You were able to answer my questions when I had them, and I think you're certainly a credit to the rural planning team. So thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions to staff? None? Perfect. The report recommendations are that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for part of 6659 Franktown Road as shown in document 1 to permit an enlarged home-based business and adjust the location of the environmental protection zone boundary as detailed in document 2, and that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council direct staff to incorporate an amendment into the new comprehensive zoning bylaw to 2026-50 for part of 6659 Franktown Road as detailed in document 3, and that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation details section of this report. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. There are no in-camera items, and there are 2 items listed as IPDs, but I haven't received a request to lift either of those. So we're down to the open mic session, and we do have 1 registered speaker. Jerry, welcome back to committee. Thank you for sticking with us for the last few hours. I'll ask staff to put your presentation up on the screen. You've got 5 minutes to address committee.
Perfect, thank you. As most of you know, my name is Jerry Pearson. I work for a company called Rolling Luxury. We've provided transportation throughout Ottawa, either for schools as well as government agencies such as the G7. We did transportation for that. Excuse me. And on top of that, like Canada Post, I just finished providing quotes for providing shuttle services to the city of Ottawa as well. So I'm here to kind of give you an idea of what I can do for you as rural wards within for the transportation. So next slide. There's many reasons why this would work that I can give you. These are just a few. Places like North Grenville and Pembroke are already doing something similar to this. And it's been successful enough that they're actually expanding. North Grenville actually just expanded into Kempville. The inflation is actually becoming a problem for a lot of families and whatnot, to where they're having problems even holding on to even just their 1 car. So something like this would provide a service to them that if they don't have a way to get into town or to doctors, whichever, groceries, this would be a service. It would be less expensive than paying gas. I noticed this morning gas was kind of up there. Within the rural wards, there has been population growth, as you all know, and it seems to be continuing. A lot of newcomers that don't have access to vehicles are now relying on taxis, as well as friends, family, any other kind of services within the area. And pretty much providing this service would give them the opportunity to get around. Next slide, please. So my objective would be to provide connectivity within each of the wards to bring passengers into Ottawa, as well as allowing passengers to, or residents to travel within each of the wards and at a low cost. So it would also provide a lower carbon footprint, provide extended transit availability and service, and cover the biggest populations in each of the wards with a fixed route, as well as a hybrid on-demand service. So if you live within that fixed route, you'll be able to arrange for that bus to stop at along the way, and that way you don't have to make it into one of the areas where there's an actual stop. Next slide, please. So we would start off the service small and then grow as needed. So not start off with like the big buses. We provide the service locally to anybody and everybody, bringing the service into the major hubs such as Place Orleans, Canada, and so on. And then even if the high-speed train does come in, we can adjust the routes to go to there as well. The fixed routes would be determined by us as well as councillors, and with again, the hybrid on-demand service. Next slide, please. So, one too far. There we go. Oh, did I mix them up? Okay, so I guess we'll go to the next one after that. So these would be the possibilities for each of the wards for the type of connectivity within the villages and then into places, as I mentioned, Place d'Orleans, Canada Centrum, Trim Road, Leitrim, Fallowfield connections. And then with, say, Ward 5, you'd be looking at coming into Canada Centrum, or even when the LRT becomes available at Moody, we can adjust to go to the LRT as well. Next slide, please. So the benefits to residents and businesses within the rural, it would be a low cost. All residents would be able to travel within Ottawa, within the wards. Each bus would have the accessibility, so you'd be looking at with at least one wheelchair on each.
Your 5 minutes elapsed here, but I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up.
Okay, I guess we can kind of jump to the end, if you don't mind. So in conclusion, these other places such as Pembroke and North Grenville can do it. We can definitely do this. We wouldn't be taking any jobs away from, say, OC Transpo. What we may end up doing is any places that do have the actual buses at the moment running through, they could alleviate those buses and drivers and put them elsewhere where it may be needed. And I guess that would be it.
Vice Chair, do you have a question?
I do, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here today, Jerry, and your commitment to moving this file forward. And I know it's I've been hearing about transportation needs in my ward going all the way back to the campaign in 2022, and I'm sure that's no different for my rural colleagues. So it's exciting to see that there are potential solutions in terms of servicing those wards. And I think you have some champions up here in terms of that idea and moving that forward. I wanted to inquire with you about, generating a formal detailed proposal with costs and stuff that we can really use to move it forward, try and find some funding, a pilot project, whatever the outcome ends up being. But do you think you are close to having something like that we might be able to use in our pursuit?
Thank you for the question. For the most part, I already do have the meat of it. I would have to kind of tweak it a little bit. But other than that, within a couple weeks, I should be able to.
Just need to add some potatoes to the meat. And
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'd be excited to see that. And I think that would be, make the moving this forward a little more real for us in terms of having something that we could present and advocate for. I often think about our time at the ROMA conference in Toronto, where we're talking to provincial ministers. This might potentially be something we could delegate on in the future. And I don't think we'd need to wait that long, but we could start having those conversations. But again, I think that would be a big step forward to have something like that we could use. So just wanted to inquire about that. Thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We must be getting close to lunch talking about meat and potatoes. Councillor Skalsky.
Thank you, Chair. I saw that you had to buzz by the slide on pricing, but can you just share some highlights on what you're thinking in terms of how accessible this would be for residents? And
I can definitely do that. So what we'd be thinking, again, these would be what's called mini coach buses. You kind of saw that on like the first slide, with one wheelchair accessible. For 4 buses that would be running plus 1 extra, it'd be 2.5 million plus tax. Unfortunately, we have to pay the tax because we are for profit. And what that would pretty much do is 7 days a week, 12-hour days, including holidays and whatnot. Pretty much round trip service. It wouldn't be just an AM service and a PM, kind of like the express buses. It'd be continuous within that time frame.
have you done any thinking about how long, like, is it a milk run? Is it how long these routes would be, or how would be the ideal?
So for the most part, depending on the words are different. So the villages are separated and whatnot. So let's say Ward 21, you'd be looking at maybe roughly anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour between buses. Ward 5, I had done kind of like a layout, or sorry, yeah, Ward 5, I had done kind of like a layout where with 4 buses, there would be, Ward 5 would be broken down into 4 different sections. And so at that point in time, you'd be looking at roughly anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half between connections. But all the buses within these wards would actually coincide with each other. That way, if anybody wanted to go from one place to another place within the ward, they'd be able to. But until we get kind of like a confirmation that says, yes, we're going to do this, it's kind of hard to find an exact time. But most of them, you'd be looking at anywhere from like, say, an hour to an hour, or sorry, 45 minutes to an hour and a half, roughly. And we do have one thing that I wasn't able to do. Residents would also be able to track where the bus is, because we are in progress of working on an app that they would be able to book the trip. Anybody that needs that hybrid section where they're not near a stop, they'd be able to book for the bus to stop for them, as well as see exactly where the bus is. Because we do have trips already that we do for schools, and we're working on that as well for the parents.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think, Jerry, that you'll find at this committee, there's willingness to look for solutions beyond what the municipality may be able to provide itself. So I appreciate you coming here today. I know you've been working with Ken Holmes, Ward 5 Rural Champion, sitting in the back there. Good to see you again, Ken. There's a willingness to find solutions that meet the needs of our residents. Ultimately, we want to provide services that residents can rely on, whether they're provided by the municipality or provided by a partner. It's about getting people out of their cars into mass transit where they need to go and back again. So I appreciate the work that you've done to put this together. I know this is the second time in 2 months that you're here at committee, so we appreciate the time that you've taken.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. Okay. Notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. I know listed on the agenda, there is a notice of motion that Vice Chair Kelly was going to read in on my behalf, but if it's okay with committee, I'll save the Vice Chair's voice.
Please do, Chair.
And I will read it in myself. I'll just read the operative clauses and certainly willing to have a conversation over the next month should there be any questions or concerns. Therefore, be it resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council direct city staff to review the Rural Transit Area A funding model and report back to the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, including the items listed as A, B, and C. Be it further resolved that city staff be directed to evaluate the feasibility of engaging private mass transportation providers to supplement rural transit service for commuters and to enhance interconnectivity between villages and major hubs, including the items listed as A, B, and C, D, and E. Be it further resolved that staff incorporate the work already underway in response to Councillor Brown's amendment to motion number 2025-6210 from the July 23rd, 2025 City Council meeting into the work and report required by this motion, and that a single consolidated report be brought forward to avoid duplication, satisfying the reporting requirements of both motions. And be it further resolved that staff report include a recommended path forward and, where feasible, an implementation plan identifying decisions required, budget impacts, operating and capital, and a proposed timeline for any pilot or pilots and or changes to the Rural Transit Area A funding model. And be it further resolved that staff report back no later than Q3 2026, subject to staff capacity and procurement requirements. So thank you very much, colleagues, and I'll acknowledge that Pat Scrumsher from OC Transco is here in the room. Thank you for coming today, Pat. Great to see you at committee. I don't believe there are any inquiries. However, under other business, I believe Councillor Skalski has a motion pertaining to delegated authority of Section 65 of the Drainage Act. However, colleagues, I'll just note that the rules of procedure need to be waived to consider this motion at today's meeting to ensure the timely future appointment of drainage engineers. So are the rules waived? Waived. Thank you very much. Councillor, I always love talking about moving water. This will increase the flow. Go ahead.
It sure will. So yes, thank you, Chair, for the chance to put this forward. Essentially, the purpose of this motion is to make it a little bit more efficient so that we don't have to review work that is essentially procedural in nature. So whereas Section 65 of the Drainage Act, RSO 1990 CD 17 provides the legislative framework for reapportioning drainage assessments when land is divided, severed, or otherwise altered in a way that affects an existing municipal drain. And whereas the municipality may be required to appoint an engineer to prepare a report under Section 65 when changes to property configuration or drainage area occur and no landowner agreement exists under Section 65(2). And whereas certain Section 65 matters may be administrative or time sensitive in nature, including those where prompt instruction to an engineer is required to fulfill statutory obligations, respond to development timelines, or maintain the integrity of the municipal drain assessment schedule. And whereas the appointment of an engineer for more substantial works for new and existing municipal drains under Section 4 and 78 of the Drainage Act would still require approval by committee and council. Therefore, be it resolved that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council delegate authority to the General Manager, Infrastructure and Water Services, and the Director, Water Linear and Customer Services, to appoint a qualified engineer for the purposes of preparing any report required under Section 65 of the Drainage Act. And be it further resolved that the General Manager shall report back to Council through annual delegated authority reporting on any engineer appointments made under this delegated authority, including the purpose of the appointment and the summary of the resulting Section 65 report.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to ask staff, I think Mr. Ryan, you're online. Maybe we'll throw it to you for a quick comment. Are staff supportive? Is this going to help provide a better service to our residents?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it will. It's there's not a requirement under the Drainage Act to go to council for appointment of a drainage engineer under Section 65. So it will expedite things somewhat, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Colleagues, any other questions for Mr. Ryan? Great. Councillor, thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think this is the common sense improvements residents expect us to bring forward. It cuts that red tape and bureaucracy and gets us further to the finish line a little quicker. So colleagues, can we let it flow? Is this item carried? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending committee today. Laurel, always great to see you in the audience. We stand adjourned. Our next meeting will be Thursday, the 2nd of April, 2026. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.